So if you've seen me on this channel before when it comes to the Marvels, looking at the title, you might have an idea of what this video is about. And if not, first off, welcome. But second, allow me to explain. You see, among the myriad of superhero flops, both movie and television-wise, that we have seen over the last 2 years, the movie that I thought might surprise people and end up doing quite well was The Marvels. Yep. That was a hill that I was willing to stand on for the better part of a whole year. It wasn't me trying to do my best Stephen A. Smith impression with some kind of hot take. It certainly wasn't me trying to make bets or hedge them. It actually went back to one specific comic series that I read, as well as seeing the potential opportunity in front of the MCU. But let me pause for just a second, because to understand, we need to get down to the nitty-gritty of what my thought process was, and for that, we have to start with Captain Marvel in the comics. Now, one thing that I will always stand on as a whole is that Captain Marvel isn't a bad character. And yes, I actually mean that. She's actually attached to some solid moments, and the more you might learn about some of those moments, the more you realize just how bad the writing was and has been for the character in the MCU. But one of the bigger issues with Captain Marvel within the comics is the fact that she hasn't had a great solo run, at least not a recent one. Yes, many people will point to 2014's Captain Marvel, Higher, Further, Faster, More, which I still think is a bad title. But that didn't do as well, and the story largely isn't considered a great one. In fact, most of Captain Marvel's best stories are mixed with bigger things going on. Like I said before, she has some great moments. Hell, she has some absolutely crazy moments depending on the story that you're reading. And if you know, you know. But in terms of her having a successful major solo story, that is still somewhat missing. That means for a large number of people, instead of getting to see her own really good arc, many would have seen her in one of 4 ensemble stories instead. House of M, Secret Wars, Secret Invasion, or what I presume a lot of people first saw or heard of her in, Civil War II. And I'll be honest, if one of your first times seeing Captain Marvel in depth in the comics was or is Civil War II, it wouldn't be hard to hate the character off of that alone, because she's basically the villain in that story, and there's some nonsensical decisions that are made when it comes to her in the first place. In fact, in some ways, that comic and what Captain Marvel represented directly clashed with how Captain Marvel was introduced in the MCU, especially for those who already knew the character, at least in the beginning. You see, when Secret Invasion, The Marvels, and Secret Wars were announced, I had a belief, despite the fact that we were beginning to see a fall from the MCU, that those storylines could tie together pretty beautifully, and at the heart of it would ironically be Captain Marvel. My hope was further heightened when thinking about how audiences reacted to Brie Larson as Captain Marvel, and here's why. The marketing of the live-action Captain Marvel was awful, full stop. It ended up pushing tired narratives without any real proof of those narratives existing, thus alienating people to the character and creating a weird distaste early on, instead of showcasing how she could add to what was going on within the Infinity Saga. Yes, it was a successful movie, but it was far from a successful transition to a new character that was supposed to be a major player moving forward, unlike Spider-Man or Black Panther's introduction in Civil War and subsequently their own movies. Plus, by this point, most of us understand the real reason why the first Captain Marvel movie was really successful to begin with. Being sandwiched in between Infinity War and Endgame will do that. I mean, let's be real, any movie in that slot would have made $1 billion, and I mean that quite literally. But money doesn't always equal popularity, and so we ended up with a Captain Marvel that was successful but still wasn't very popular among greater MCU fandom. So in knowing that, imagine if Disney decided to pivot a bit and shift Captain Marvel into either a villain or more of a hard-nosed character, one that you would almost love to hate, a la Wyatt Russell's US agent in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Like in wrestling, when they want to turn someone heel and they start laying the seeds, something like that could have been a fresh turnaround for Captain Marvel, one that actually would get people talking. And also one where we would have to take her power very seriously, because in some ways she has the potential to be a major threat. It would have been a move that would have also allowed Brie Larson to really show her range as an actress. Remember, she did win an Oscar, so she's actually pretty good when the writing is as well. It also could have made for a more impactful situation with, say, Miss Marvel. I mean, imagine if Captain Marvel turned on Miss Marvel in the end, like she did with Miles Morales. Once again, if you know, you know. I mean, think of the storylines you could have there, with the Kree and Kang off in the background as the bigger, overwhelming threats. But stop, hold on. Before you go off and do it for me, I'm just gonna stop myself right there. I know, it's all a ridiculous pipe dream, I get it. But that was actually my literal hope of what Captain Marvel could be in the MCU. And I really do believe that something like that could have really shaken things up, something that Disney and the MCU desperately need at this point. So why not do that with a flagship character? Just imagine if they decided to take that chance. It wouldn't hurt them in the slightest and would be such a change from the status quo. But instead, it seems that we're getting more of the same Captain Marvel, just wackier to make her more likable if Nia DaCosta's interviews are anything to go by. And this is why the marketing of the first trailer and the way it was presented was a bad idea. Now don't get me wrong, I think the comedy aspect wasn't that bad, but the focus on Miss Marvel and Monica Rambeau should have been for the second trailer, not the first. In fact, the final trailer and subsequent TV spots should have been the first video promos for the Marvels that we got. Why? Because we actually know who Captain Marvel is. We got a whole movie and some very important scenes in Endgame with her, and this is supposed to be a direct sequel to her movie. So to heavily feature Miss Marvel and Monica Rambeau over Captain Marvel didn't make a lot of marketing sense, because the general audience doesn't really know these two. Sure, a lot of people did see WandaVision, but Monica Rambeau wasn't the most memorable side character like, say, Agatha or Ralph, and Miss Marvel wasn't a show that many people did watch on Disney+. So much so that Disney had to try and release it on other platforms just to see if they can garner some interest. So the number of people who would have had any familiarity with those characters is a much smaller number than those who would with Captain Marvel. I mean, I'm all for showing the team, but start with the person who's supposed to be the leader that people actually know. Hell, even actress-wise it didn't make sense. Teyana Parris is a really talented actress, and Iman Vellani looks like she has a great future ahead of her, but no one really knows who they are compared to the Academy Award-winning actress who's been on movie screens since the early 2000s as a child actor. So when it came to the first trailer, while people pointed to other things like tone and bad-looking effects, ultimately, the lack of Captain Marvel still remained its biggest problem, which is why the final trailer, albeit better than the first and second, was so jarring. Not only did they shift back to Carol Danvers almost completely, they presented it in such a more serious tone that to look back on the first and second trailer is almost as if looking back at trailers for two different movies. But the problem with the final trailer was a lot of it was reused footage from the previous films, begging the question of just how much Captain Marvel will we actually get in a movie that's supposed to be the sequel to her first movie. Like I said before, I do believe that Captain Marvel is a solid character. I just believe that she's been poorly managed by Marvel as a whole, comic and movie-wise. The godlike powers where she's so powerful that she doesn't have to showcase any growth has and always will be a weird choice for a brand where its most popular characters like Spider-Man and the X-Men, or even more recent MCU major players in Captain America or Iron Man, are so relatable. Even Scarlet Witch, who admittedly might have gone off the rails a little bit too quickly, and Thor, who was given the stupid treatment for basically no reason at all, remain as examples of all-powerful characters who still manage to be relatable because of life situations and motivations. But even more so than anything, one thing all of those characters have in common that Captain Marvel doesn't is character growth. That's why it's so weird to see all of this unfold, because it's not like it can't be done. They just haven't done it for her for some reason. Which is part of the reason why so many people point to Captain Marvel being an agenda push rather than a character that can be built up. But I don't blame the character, nor do I blame Brie Larson. There just hasn't been good enough writing for Captain Marvel, and unfortunately she's been used more as a symbol to try and represent something rather than build a character that we can ultimately cheer and relate to. And ultimately, that lack of good writing and overall focus will probably hurt the film, especially if we are set to get more of the same. Which means that I will probably be wrong about the Marvels. Originally, I actually believed it would make $500 million or more. Yeah, that was me. And honestly, it's kind of a shame, because the last thing that anybody wants is another middling MCU film. But it looks like that's exactly what we'll get. And ironically, most of the fault lays with the original marketing of Captain Marvel. So if the Marvels is good, it will be a nice surprise, and I'll shout it to the rooftops. But if it's not, and it's largely looking like it won't be, it'll represent yet another missed opportunity. But I guess after a not so hot phase 4, we're all kinda used to that. Wish it wasn't so, but as always, to everyone out there, thank you for watching. I'm John Automates. See you next time.